Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs are dominating in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Good luck beating this team in Atlanta anytime soon. That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Kirby Smart is 9-5 as Georgia's head coach inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Of course, the Dogs have had some heartbreaking losses in that stadium, no doubt about it, but they've had some of the biggest wins in program history in that building. There's been a lot of great memories there, especially recently. And we're going to be breaking down each one of Georgia's big wins in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So this is a fun video to make. We're going to be just talking about Georgia's big epic wins. And again, by my count, I didn't use Google or AI or any of that because I'm sure they're wrong. But Georgia's 9-5. Excuse me, Kirby Smart is 9-5 in that stadium. So we're going to be ranking all of those wins from worst to first. So strap in. We're going to take a trip down memory lane and talk about these big epic wins. So coming in at number 9, again, we're going from worst to first, is the 2020 Peach Bowl. The only thing people really remember about this game is the Jackpot Lesney 53-yard game-winning kick. Still one of the best kicks I've ever seen with my own two eyes. We were up in the press box, but this comes in last because I think Georgia was ready to end the season already. This game did not matter. I remember going to the stadium thinking no one's going to remember this game after it's over. And because of the kick and how it ended, that's the only reason people remember this game. Luke Fickell coached Cincinnati to the loss. The final score, I believe, was 24-21. My guy Azeez Ojulari had a safety on the game's final play, but it was the kick that won it. But Luke Fickell was terrible as Cincinnati's coach in that game. If he would have played the clock correctly, Georgia would not have had time to kick that game-winning field goal. So Cincinnati had Georgia on the ropes, but the Dogs came back and won that game. But it's the worst win, in my opinion, that they have in that stadium. Coming in at number 8 was last year's win against Georgia Tech. They did win the game, but it was ugly. Bad offense, just a slow, boring, ugly game. And Georgia won, I believe, 16, something to 6. I don't even have the score in front of me. It was low scoring, came down to the final Georgia Tech Hail Mary. Now, the Dogs did win. That's why it's not last. But ugly, ugly victory over Georgia Tech in Atlanta. The game should have been awesome. Should have been better than what it was. But Georgia gets that ugly, low-scoring win. Number 7, we're going to go to the 2024 season opener against Clemson. And this is a game that a lot of Georgia fans love, but it's coming in at number 7 for me. 34-3, just a total curb stomping. Clemson was a top 10 team. They thought they could win that game. A lot of Clemson fans did. And it was just not even comparable. Georgia was clearly head and shoulders above that Clemson team, and they kind of rubbed Clemson's face in it. Again, when you win by 31 points, total domination. The defense was outstanding. Carson Beck had 2 touchdowns. Easy, comfortable game. It was over by the half. I'm snacking in the press box. Felt great, but there are still 6 big wins that were bigger than that one. Coming in at number 6 for me was the absolute beatdown of Oregon. Thinking back, I felt like Georgia won that game by 100 points. They took their foot off the gas pedal, basically didn't even play the fourth quarter, still won by 46 points. Again, 49-3 against a top 10 Oregon team in Atlanta. Stetson Bennett was terrific, showing early that, hey, he was going to be one of the best players in college football that year. The defense dominated Bo Nix, who I believe went 0-5 against Georgia in his career. Could be 0-4. He never won, and they certainly didn't win that game. The amazing interception by Malachi Starks, the freshman playing in his very first game, jump and turn around, making that play on the football. That was one of the highlights, but just a crazy game for that Georgia Bulldog team in general. And when you win by 46 points easily, too, that set the tone for the rest of the way. Of course, the Dogs would go undefeated that year. That was not the biggest win they had in Mercedes-Benz Stadium that year. I'm going to talk about that one in just a second. I think everyone knows where I'm going with that. But number 6 for me was that total beatdown of Oregon. Just not even fair. I felt bad for Dan Lanning and that crew. I don't feel bad for the opposing team. many times. I felt so bad for Oregon. It was just varsity and JV. They should not have been on the same field with Georgia that day. Number 5, 2024 SEC championship win over Texas, 22-19 for the SEC crown in overtime. Now, you know, Texas is not a rival. Georgia's had their way with Texas recently when it comes to big moments. Texas does not run the SEC. They still need to get past Georgia. But this was a game where Georgia said, no, you're welcome to the conference. You're not top dog. We're still the top dog. We're going to put you in your place. But this was a big win because Georgia still had their national title hopes in front of them. This is the game where Carson Beck gets hurt. They bring in Gunnar Stockton, and he kind of leads Georgia to victory. Wasn't easy. He almost had his head ripped off in that game, but the Dawgs got it done. 22-19 final score. Big deal, but it still didn't feel like the SEC championship was the way it used to, like it did in 2022 against LSU. This is my number 4 biggest win. They put a 50-burger on Brian Kelly and LSU. Chris Smith returned that blocked kickback for a touchdown. That was basically a 10-point swing. I think it was 0-0 at the time. LSU looks like they're about to go up 3-0. It's blocked. Chris Smith, one of the more underrated players in Georgia Bulldog history, takes it, 90, 95 yards back to the house. That set the tone for the rest of the game. But Stetson Bennett was phenomenal. The defense wasn't great. They played pretty well early on, then kind of gave up some points late. But final score 50-30, something like that. I know Georgia hit the 50 mark, and Stetson Bennett was terrific. And you knew even then, that this team could win the national title. But to see it happen against an LSU team that just beat them 2 years prior, or I guess 3 years prior, completely different LSU team. But Georgia, for them to have the perfect season, they needed to win this game, and they did. When you put up 50 points against LSU, that's always memorable. To do it for an SEC championship, which still mattered more back then than it does now, or than it did 2 years later, it was a big, big deal, and of course set the tone for the rest of the way. Number 3, biggest Kirby Smart win for the Georgia Bulldogs in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It came last year, beating Alabama in Atlanta for the SEC crown, something that just needed to happen. Georgia needed to beat Alabama and continue to fight that elephant that's still on their backs. They did it for the national championship, of course, several years prior. They needed to do it again on this stage, and they got the job done. 20, I don't have the score in front of me, but it was convincing. This did not come down to the wire. Georgia should have shut them out. It looked like they were going to put a big, blank Alabama in Atlanta, but it was DeMello Jones had the personal foul. It kept that drive going on. They would end up scoring. But at the end of the day, I was not snacking at the half, but everyone felt good. And this was not a close game. It was a beating. Georgia beat down Alabama and Atlanta for the SEC crown. Big, big win. Georgia still had their national championship hopes alive. So, you win that game, you get the bye. You're set up pretty nicely. But, of course, they would fall to Ole Miss a month later, which is another topic that is absolutely insane. But that's number 3. Number 2 is the 2017 SEC championship win over Auburn, 28-7. Self-explanatory, clinched a playoff spot. They were going to the Rose Bowl with this win. Playoffs on the line, national championship was on the line for the winner. It was the biggest Georgia Auburn game of all time in over 100 years. This was the biggest one, and Georgia spanked them. The defense was outstanding. DeAndre Swift had a big game. He took off for that long run. Still one of the loudest I've ever heard Mercedes-Benz Stadium when he's taken off running Georgia to the Rose Bowl. It was electric. It was just a massive, massive moment. The environment, you could feel it in the stands. Georgia needed to win that game, and they crushed them. Again, this was not close. Georgia crushed Auburn in the biggest Georgia-Auburn game of all time to go to the playoffs. So that's number 2. And then, of course, number 1, I'm going to say it was the national championship game because it was. If we're including context, if we're being real, Georgia-Ohio State 2022 Peach Bowl was for the national championship in Atlanta. The winner goes off and gets to crush TCU by 40, 50 points. Everyone knew it. Ohio State knew if they beat Georgia, they were going to win the national championship. Georgia felt the same way. The winner gets to embarrass TCU. This was the game. And of course, we all know what happened. 42-41 final score in the real national championship game. The Buckeyes missed the kick late after Stetson Bennett marched them down the field for a game-winning touchdown. Everyone remembers Arian Smith with the long touchdown. That was right after, I believe, Javon Bullard changed the game with that clean hit to send Marvin Harrison back to Columbus. He was seeing stars from that hit. It was legal, and it changed the game. Brock Bowers had the crazy fourth down acrobatic move to keep the chains going. There were so many big moments and highlights in this game. It was a heavyweight punch, one of the best classic playoff games we'll probably ever see. It was just an amazing game overall, and the Dawgs were the better team at the end, and they proved it and allowed them to go on and win a national championship game. But that national championship game was in Atlanta for the Peach Bowl, and Georgia got the job done. Crazy, crazy, wild environment. One of the best games you could ever ask for. That was the biggest win that Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs have had in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I'm sure many big wins are still to come, maybe this upcoming season. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. I'll see you over on dawgpost.com.